So what to do, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the King of Crunk and BME recordings present Lil Scrappy. So basically, this is a double album. Half of it is Trillville and half of it is Lil Scrappy. Well, it's not really a double album, but it's basically two EPs crammed onto one album. You get 7 Lil Scrappy songs, 7 Trillville songs. So this time I'm just going to review the Lil Scrappy album. I'll get to the Trillville album down the road. But basically, this album had 3 singles from each of these artists. So the Trillville side of the album had singles like Never Ever, Get Some Crunk in Your System, and Some Cut. And the Lil Scrappy side of things had No Problem, Head Bussa, and Forever I Love Atlanta. So that's definitely kind of a dope concept about it. Both of these artists were kind of relatively unknown around this time. Lil Jon had the Midas touch between like the early 2000s to about the mid 2000s, about between like the summer of 2001 to about the winter of 2005. Everything he did kind of reached everything that Lil Jon did around this time kind of reached like the top of the charts and just had like a lot of popularity and just overall crunk kind of sensations. He was just a trendsetter and a trailblazer around this time. So these were like the next cats to blow up as far as that kind of went. Now Trillville did kind of stick around somewhat. They definitely lasted in like the mid 2000s, but they kind of burnt out by like 2007, 2008. But Lil Scrappy had a little bit larger popularity. He kind of was one that blew up pretty quickly, and he was like a Lil Jon protege for like the longest time. And that manifested further in 2006 when he dropped the Bred to Die, Born to Live album from that particular time period. He also got affiliation with 50 Cent and even Eminem produced a little bit for that. Even Eminem produced a little bit for that particular album as far as that kind of went. But Lil Scrappy is basically pretty crunk. But the thing about Lil Scrappy as to how he does it is he's not really quite as outrageous. I mean, he's kind of like he's kind of like a, Lil Scrappy is kind of like a fight starter. He does kind of make some fights kind of happen and pop off as far as that kind of goes, but he just is not quite as like shrilly kind of crazy as Lil Jon. It's not to say that he's not crazy, but it's just kind of the concept that some of these, like when you listen to some of these singles on here, like Head Bussa, No Problem, and Forever I Love Atlanta are all crunk songs. They're all crunk songs and they have Lil Jon beats and that type of stuff, but they're not really the usual outlandish kind of Lil Jon craziness that you'd expect on songs like I Don't Give a Fuck by Lil Jon and Bia Bia and some of those type moments. But they're great crunk songs. It's just a new variation, kind of spin off of crunk that just works extremely well. And I definitely like the concept of getting these just work quite well. And I like basically Lil Scrappy was pretty popular throughout the mid 2000s. I just would have to say he definitely worked in his valve as far as that kind of went. He later teamed up with like Crime Mob and some of those type moments, but that's just kind of the concept about it that this Lil Jon offshoots definitely worked pretty well as far as that kind of went. So I just would have to say it's interesting to kind of get if you're expecting like the typical throw chairs and stand on couches type vibes of Lil Jon. Lil Scrappy is pretty much like a good, he definitely is kind of like one that can incite the situation, kind of get you crunk and excited, but he's not really like as uproarious, kind of crazy, like I was saying. He just has more kind of, he's more composed. That's really the thing you'll notice about Lil Scrappy, especially on a song like No Problem or even Head Bust in some cases. He's just a lot more composed, just more contemplative, and just kind of more just authorized as far as that kind of goes. Just an interesting concept, but we'll go ahead and talk about the singles. Like I was saying, there's approximately 3 singles on this album, but the thing about it is Wikipedia does not really list like the singles as much on this particular album. It lists 2 of the Trillville ones, but it only lists 1 Lil Scrappy. But I know that Head Buster was a single, and I want to say that Forever I Love Atlanta was at least like a promo single. But we'll go ahead and talk about No Problem first. No Problem is the first single off this project. It's a superb, menacing piano beat, and it's a nice, low-key, passive crunk bubbler, I would say, and it's just a great hit single. This one just has a real excellent kind of beat on here. Just really works extremely well. It's a crunk song. Doesn't have Lil Jon on this song as much, but he did produce this beat, and it's just an excellent one. This is probably one of Lil Jon's best beats overall. I'd have to say this is just a really kind of shrill one, just overall vivacious one that just works extremely well as far as that kind of goes. This really thrilling type one that just works. It's the passive. The thing about this song is it's passive. It's not really like typical kind of stand on the couch and get crazy kind of song, but it just really incites you. This Lil Scrappy learned about just being able to say, like, I want this to be manic and crazy, but just not something that's just full blown carnivorous. And it just works to kind of get you excited a little bit, get more people ignited more so than just have them just pulsating, just being full blown crazy. It's just a good one to kind of get incited. And that sort of concept just works real well. It's a real passive crunk kind of song. Head Bus is a little bit more rowdy. This is the second single. This one has Lil Jon on here. He's not full blown on here like him and the East Side Boys aren't full blown, but they do a lot of chorus work, and these are just typical These are just kind of typical Lil Jon choruses of like that sheer kind of craziness that he's known for. So Head Bust is like an overcast kind of rowdy bubbler. I would say it's a nice vanilla crunk party joint, I would say. And this is some vintage Lil Jon craziness. So definitely unlike the chorus, Lil Scrappy handles these verses pretty well as far as that kind of goes. But he's just a lot more composed and just kind of steadfast. Lil Scrappy is just kind of a lot more composed and steadfast with his delivery as far as that kind of goes. But these are just, it's a very kind of overcast and just kind of bubbling kind of song that this kind of feels a lot cloudy, but I do like the rowdiness and noisiness of this particular song. It's just an overall bubbler. It's just not quite as crazy as Never Eva, but I do feel like it's a pretty good one. It's just a good follow up to kind of get, and it's a good look for Lil Scrappy as far as just teaming up with Lil Jon and kind of having like a relatively noisy one. I'd say the craziness on here is about like a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. It's a pretty vanilla crunk song, but it still works as far as what is going along with it. You can do a lot worse than, and yeah, I would say you can do a lot worse than finding less crazy songs in this particular song as far as that kind of goes. That's just kind of the concept, but that's just kind of the thing. So Forever I Love Atlanta is basically like the third single in some cases. It's basically like the promo single, I would have to say, but it's a good creeping kind of murky crunk gem, I would say, and it has clapping energy in the chorus, I would say. It has thunderous clapping energy in the chorus. That just means it's like a typical kind of Lil Jon type hook as far as that kind of goes, just that standard craziness. And I just would have to say Lil Scrappy has composure on these songs. So all of these songs, all three of the singles, Lil Scrappy's pretty, his delivery is just so steadfast and composed. It's just interesting kind of get that. But these are all kind of insightful kind of songs. They just really get you crunk and that type of stuff. But it's just, for the most part, the crunkness is retained to like the choruses. And that's just kind of the concept about it. But really, these are just Southern fried kind of gems on here that just work extremely well. They all do have some rowdy energy, but it's just not the typical altitude of like a normal Lil Jon fare as far as that kind of goes. But it's not like these are bad. These are excellent. This album's going to get a really high score, so just know that it's going to get a pretty raised score, I would have to say. But to basically talk about the rest of this album, the whole thing about it is just being able to say and such that there's 7 songs on here, 4 skits. There's 11 songs on here, 4 skits. That narrows it down to 7 songs. And out of those 7 songs, I wound up liking 6. So the only real song I didn't like on here is just Be Real. And the problem with this particular song is this, that's the only real homely song on here, and it just kind of felt out of the ordinary. Trying to get like a crunk cat who's usually known for like the party starters and more crunk type moments and Lil Jon type moments. It just kind of felt outlandish. I think that kind of needed work. Now Lil Scrappy managed to perfect this later, he Lil Scrappy managed to perfect this later on his 2006 album with some of those type album cuts, but I just would have to say, as far as this kind of goes, that this is like the only real dud on the album. But to talk about the other 3 songs on here, like a real nice gleaming one, real nice one on here is Diamonds in My Pinky Ring. This is pretty much a southern fried syrupy gleam of a song, I would say. It's a good vanilla club cut for like a regular night out. So this is just one that feels like standard kind of Texas type fare as far as that kind of goes. Something that UGK would kind of do, but just more in like a Lil Jon sense. This is the only song on the album that's not produced by Lil Jon, but this is still a pretty good southern fried one to kind of have. This is just like a really nice vanilla club joint as far as that kind of goes. This really has like those 808s on there that just work pretty damn well. This is pretty vanilla type tune, but this is an overall nice one. So this is just for like standard and typical kind of nights out as far as that kind of goes, just within that context. But it just works with that extreme fashion as far as that kind of goes. It's regular sounding. There are some kind of regular and vanilla type bops on here, but I do like the concept that Lil Scrappy managed to flesh out, like kind of having kind of typical night and regular kind of sounding crunk numbers. I'm just definitely glad that he was able to do that on here. It's just kind of one of those fashions as far as getting that. Another example, 2 examples of like this more typical and kind of vanilla type crunk on here would be What the Fuck and Gone. We'll go ahead and talk about Gone first. Gone is kind of a mini Get Buck song, I would say. It's a crunk song, but kind of album cut wise, I would definitely say. It's just a solid basic party starter, and it's pretty catchy. So this one has Bo Hagen on here, which is another protege of Lil Jon that didn't quite manage to drop an album. I mean, I think Bo Hagen did drop albums, but Wikipedia just doesn't have any articles about him, so I don't know that much about him. But Wikipedia doesn't have any articles about him and that type of stuff. But I am eventually going to review some of his stuff. I would say that he does pretty good job on Gone. This is just a real nice kind of crunk type song, just kind of in a more kind of album cut type fashion, just a more low key kind of one. I mean, it has some of the craziness of Lil Jon, just without Lil Jon on there. It's just a little bit more kind of B list and just kind of standard fare as far as that kind of goes. But it is a nice one. And then another one that's another highlight to round out the rest of the cuts I liked on here is What the Fuck. So this one What the Fuck is kind of a regular day mellow type of evening cut. I would definitely say it's lackadaisical, but it's still crunk in like a modest sense. So this is just kind of what I would listen to, where the club is kind of a little bit dry and just a little bit more mellow as far as that's kind of concerned. Just a lot more lackadaisical and just kind of more where there's just kind of quieter moments where it's not quite as crazy. Like this is a pretty crazy song in like a certain sense, but it's just not quite as ferocious as songs like Fila or Forever I Love Atlanta or Head Bussa or No Problem. Even I feel like the singles definitely have more fashion, but I do like some of these moments. This is just one that kind of gets me excited. This is What the Fuck is just kind of one that gives me kind of some energy and gets me excited more. This is just kind of one to listen to at like 6:37 p.m. before you get ready to step out and get ready to have a time. It's just kind of the calm before the storm type notion as far as that's kind of concerned. It's a good kind of standard fare to have on like a night out as far as that's kind of fashion, but it's just not quite where the craziness has kind of reached its peak or pitch just yet. I feel like obviously, Head Bussa and the singles, Head Bussa, No Problem, Forever, I Love Atlanta would be the songs to listen to at like 9:30, 10:30, midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. But I kind of feel like this is one. I definitely feel like What the Fuck is kind of rowdy in like a mellow kind of sense, more lackadaisical. But I would definitely say this could be one for like 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., something like that as the things are initially kicking off. So it's an overall nice one. This kind of was exhilarating for me. It was kind of exhilarating for me, gave me some excitement. That's definitely a good one. So yeah, to basically score this album, I'm gonna give this album like a 10 out of 10. At least the Lil Scrappy. To score this album, I'm gonna give this album like a 10 out of 10. At least the Lil Scrappy side. There's only one true song out of these seven on here that I didn't enjoy, so I'd have to say it's basically a classic out of the Dirty South. I would definitely have to say. As far as what Lil Jon had stationed and had that kind of happen, the singles all hit like a ton of bricks. And I just feel like this is a particular album with this a lot of craziness. I like Lil Scrappy's composure on here, and he just knew how to get things kicked off. I do kind of feel like, in some cases, maybe the album cuts like What the Fuck, Diamonds in My Pinky Ring, and Gone maybe not hit immediately as much, but there are three singles. For a 7-song album, the fact that there were three singles on here, I think that that should suffice most people's probably whetted appetite as far as that kind of goes. But I look after, there are some other moments. Maybe they're not quite as immediate, but they are pretty fulfilling if you just are looking for more crunk and kind of vanilla and typical kind of night type times as far as that kind of goes and such. It's just good to kind of get those. So I just would have to say, in terms of the social score, I'm going to give the social score like a 10. I'm going to give the social score a 10 because most of the time EPs do not normally have three singles. So I just would have to say, I mean, the fact that there were 6 singles off this album, both the Trillville and Lil Scrappy combined having 6 singles is pretty damn good. So I definitely would say it gets a 10 out of 10. It's Lil Jon, so he's a typical kind of party keg and crazy motherfucker. So I just look after it, just being able to say as far as that goes, just some good stuff to kind of get. Just has some great beats on here, some great southern fried kind of energy, and just overall great tones. I just like the concept of getting some of these. This works pretty damn well. And I just would have to say, in terms of the future, like Lil Scrappy's been kind of quiet in recent times, so it's kind of a disappointment. But this is a pretty classic album. I do feel like his 2006 album, Bred to Live, Born to Die, is another nice one that I'm gonna have to get to eventually. But this is some good stuff here, and we'll have to get some more of these.